The sun rises in Lagos. Teacher Ofolakemi Ofili is already on the road. But before she can get to work, she needs to find fuel. Her morning drive takes her past petrol stations that have run dry. Fuel prices in Nigeria have climbed in recent weeks from about 54 US cents per litre to as high as 93 US cents. The price surge evidently follows the conflict between the United States, Israel and Iran, which has driven up global crude and freight costs.
I have to get to work. I'm late already. As soon as I know this fuel will get to 1,000, I will have full my tank, and I bought 830 by Wednesday last week. I bought 830, and now fuel is 1,000 to 1,003.
Eventually, Ofili finds a station selling petrol, though at a price far higher than what she had paid just days earlier. Nigeria's Dangote Petroleum Refinery said on March 5th that it would prioritize supply to the domestic market following the outbreak of conflict. However, it raised its petrol ex-depot price by roughly 13%.
I pray God intervene in the war so that it will come to an end. Because this fuel scarcity or fuel increments now, it will affect everybody. It will make foodstuff to go up. A lot of things will go up. Transportation will also go up.
Ofili paid about $14 for petrol, but the amount she receives barely moves the needle on her fuel gauge.
I bought fuel 20,000, and 20,000 is not up to 20 litres. Only 19 litres. You can imagine what Nigeria is turning to now. Like before, if I bought fuel 20,000 can give me like maybe 25 litres. If you see my tank, the 20,000 naira fuel is not anywhere at all.
According to Nigeria's regulator, Dangote's gasoline supply to the local market recently reached 40.1 million litres. This is just over two-thirds of the country's daily requirement of around 60 million litres. The refinery says it was sourcing additional crude at prevailing international prices, with Nigerian crude grades currently $3 to $6 per barrel more expensive than Brent. For commuters, rising fuel prices could mean higher transport fares. Bus stops in Lagos are already crowded as passengers rush to board public vans.
If the fuel scarcity passes, if I can't see fuel, I will go to work with public transport. But once I see fuel again this week, maybe by Wednesday, I have to top up like 20 or 30,000 so that I will not experience jumping from one bus to another.
For now, Ofili makes it to work, but she knows the search for fuel is far from over.
I'm at my workplace now. I have to go till another day before I will look for fuel. Maybe Wednesday or Thursday, I will try and look for fuel. I know some filling stations will sell during the week.
With prices rising and supplies uneven, many Nigerians are bracing for the possibility that getting to work may soon become even more expensive. Ian Kinua, CGTN.
Well, let's delve further into the impact on the African continent. And joining us to discuss this is Kennedy Mbeva, a research associate from the Center for the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge. Great to have you with us on the show, sir. And I'd like to start off with the economic implications of this conflict and certainly its current impact on key areas such as inflation, supply chains, and also African nations' import bills. How severely have African nations been hit in this area? What's your take?
There's significant concern at the moment about what the implications would be. And we're already seeing a lot of speculation, and that is driving significant economic effects. For example, we can see oil prices going up significantly in different parts of the continent, even though the supply chains haven't been significantly affected yet. So that is driving a lot of concern before the actual economic impacts are hitting the countries. But of course, because fossil fuels or oil is quite a huge part of the economy, for example, in public transport, affecting food commodities, we can see also prices are going significantly up, and that is affecting the consumer sentiment, and people are really concerned about whether they can afford commodities like food, or also just making their way to work by paying higher and higher transport costs, or even paying for higher fuel costs. But also for governments, there's a lot of concern because for many African governments, they have limited foreign exchange reserves, but they have to use that money to pay for the higher import bill that they're facing over time. And the higher the oil prices go, the more these African countries have to pay in terms of foreign exchange. And that puts them in a very difficult position because they also have to service foreign loans, which they have to use the foreign currency to do so. So we can see already before the actual impacts hit, there's a lot of concern and speculation that is driving up the oil prices, affecting commodities, but also the sentiment of the public on whether they can afford to go to work or move around or even afford food commodities.
And besides the economic impact, is there any concern on the political level? Have there been any significant political effects on Africa so far? And do you expect that we'll see this conflict to have a ripple effect on peace and security on the continent in the longer term?
There could be some political effects very soon down the line, and that's when the concerns about oil prices going really up being a reality of life. When people cannot afford food because the prices have gone up for a sustained period of time, that might be problematic and might bring up issues, for example, protests, taking people to the streets to protest about the high cost of living, including food, but also inflation, where the prices of almost everything goes up. We saw that from COVID, during and after COVID, when the economies were badly hit, and there were protests, especially by young people, about the affordability of commodities. But there's also another bigger political challenge, which has to do with austerity measures. And this is where African governments, when they're struggling to pay their foreign debt, they might have to raise taxes on people. And we've seen such measures are not popular amongst the public. And when you combine inflation with hiking the taxes for people, that would create political problems down the line. And that will most likely instigate protests. But also for governments who might find themselves in a position where they might consider defaulting from paying foreign loans because they do not have the foreign exchange, that might pose a big political problem down the line.
Now, it's interesting, amid all the doom and the gloom, there's been some positive news, mostly from the private sector. For example, we know Dangote Group did come out today saying that its fertilizer unit has seen a significant rise in demand for its products, of course, following the conflict. Have there been any upsides to this conflict so far? Are there any winners in this conflict?
Absolutely. And there are winners and losers, but it seems that the public is on the losing end because of high inflation and the high cost of commodities, but also the scarcity of fuel. But also for those who are selling the oil and those who are controlling the supply chains, they might have a bigger profit margin. And already before the economic effects have already hit, we can see, due to speculation, there's a hike in oil prices, and that is being driven more by sentiment rather than the actual supply issues. And that, of course, shows that they're winners in the people who are investing as well in that sector. But also in terms of the currency speculators, those who are speculating that African currencies will get weaker, they're moving their money from African currencies and putting the money into the US dollar as they consider them safe havens. So for those investors, it's kind of it's a windfall for them and some of the oil producers in the continent. But for the consumers, it's a big challenge because of inflation and high costs of commodities. Governments are caught in between because it's good for investment in the oil and gas industry because they can make the case that they need energy security, so attracting more investments. But then it's a big challenge for them as well because they have to deal with the political effects of the consumers receiving the short end of the stick from the fallout of the energy shocks.
Quite right. Now, you've sort of touched on this, but I'd like to get a sense of your thoughts on what are some of the most important concerns that are top on the list for Africa in the near and also longer term as we watch what unfolds.
Yeah, the three main issues that are at the top of the list. Of course, the first one is security. And the big debate now is, it's very clear that if Africa is a net importer of oil, the continent is highly vulnerable to some of these shocks in the supply chains. And that raises the question of security. Can the continent ensure that we have energy security? That's one big political question on the table. The other question is about sovereignty as well. And we've had African countries trying to secure energy supply, for example, to power the industrialization of the continent. But then that, of course, requires control over those resources. And you can see we have limited sovereignty over some of the oil resources in the continent and other energy sources. And that raises the question then, how do we strengthen the sovereignty so that we can control the resources in the continent? And last but not least is the question of sustainability. Of course, industrialization is a big aspect of this challenge, but also we can see there are some sources of energy that are renewable and more sustainable, such as geothermal and hydro. And the question is then, how can such kinds of energy be provide more security for the continent, power industrialization, but also ensure that the consumer prices are quite low because there's abundant energy. Those are the three top issues that are dominating the agenda in the short, medium, and longer term.
All right.